It's strange how endings never sound the way you expect them to. I always imagined ours would be loud, full of tears, broken glass, maybe even the sound of a slammed door. But when she left, it was quiet. Too quiet. She sat across from me in the small apartment we'd once called ours. The same apartment that still smelled like her vanilla shampoo and jasmine tea. Her fingers were wrapped around a chipped mug, steam rising between us like a curtain neither of us dared to part. Her voice came soft, careful, like she'd practiced it 100 times in her head. I think I need peace. Peace. That word. It landed in the room heavier than a scream. I blinked, waiting for her to explain, to fill the silence with something that made sense. But she didn't. She just looked down at her mug, tracing the rim with her thumb like it was safer than meeting my eyes. Peace? I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. Is that another word for leaving? She didn't answer. The rain started tapping against the window, gentle at first, then harder, as if the sky itself couldn't stand how calm she was. I'm not leaving because of you, she said finally. I laughed, that broken, quiet kind of laugh that sounds more like an exhale. Then who else is there to leave because of? She sighed, closing her eyes. It's not about blame. It's about space. I just need to breathe again. Her voice trembled, but not enough to mean regret. It was the tremor of someone convincing themselves they were right. I wanted to fight, to tell her she was my peace, that whatever storm she felt, I could calm it if she just stayed. But I saw it in her eyes. She was already gone. Her body was still there, but her heart had packed its things days ago. I leaned back, feeling the couch press against my spine like the weight of realization itself. Do I make it that hard for you to breathe? I asked quietly. She hesitated, and that hesitation hurt more than any yes or no ever could. Outside, the thunder rolled like a closing curtain. I don't remember how long we sat there after that. Maybe minutes, maybe an hour. The sound of rain filled the spaces where our words used to live. I kept waiting for her to change her mind, to look up, to say she was just tired, that we could fix this. But she didn't. Instead, she stood, slowly, like she was afraid of breaking something fragile. She set the mug down on the table, the clink echoing too loud in the stillness. When she walked toward the door, her hand brushed against the photo frame hanging by the entryway, the one of us at the beach laughing, wind in her hair. It tilted slightly when she passed, and for a moment, I thought she'd fix it. She didn't. Take care of yourself, she said. Her tone was soft, not loving, not cold, just final. Then she opened the door, and that was it. No slammed door, no crying, no last-minute turn, just a quiet exit, like peace leaving war behind. I sat there long after she was gone, staring at the door as if it might bring her back. The rain outside blurred the city lights, turning everything into watercolor. Beautiful, but impossible to touch. My heart wasn't breaking the way I thought it would. It was hollowing. Like something was being carefully carved out, piece by piece, leaving space where warmth used to live. I whispered her words again. I need peace. It sounded noble, healing. But when you're the one being left, peace feels like betrayal in disguise, because peace means she wanted distance. From me. I looked around the room. Every corner had her fingerprints. The half-read books, the hair tie on the couch, the faint lipstick stain on a wine glass. It felt like living in the ghost of something that hadn't even died properly. I stood up, walked to the window, and pressed my forehead against the glass. The rain was steady now. Relentless. Funny how the world doesn't stop for heartbreak. Hours passed, maybe days. The clock on the wall kept ticking, a cruel reminder that time was moving, even if I wasn't. I replayed her final moments in my head like a song stuck on repeat, the tone of her voice, the softness in her goodbye, the way she refused to look back. I tried to hate her for it, but hate requires energy. And all I had left was silence. So I let it sit. The quiet, the ache, the rain. They became my companions. I remember picking up her mug, the one she left behind. The tea had gone cold. I poured it out slowly, watching the liquid swirl down the drain like something being erased. That's when it hit me. She didn't leave in anger. She left in peace. And somehow, that hurt more. Because anger means there's still something left to fight for. Peace means it's already over. The night deepened, and the apartment began to hum with the kind of stillness that feels alive. I sat on the couch again, staring at nothing. My phone lit up once, her name flashing across the screen. A message. I hope you understand someday. I stared at it for a long time before turning the screen off, because I didn't, and maybe I never would. I wanted to reply, to tell her I'd wait, or that I'd change, or that I'd already forgiven her. But all of those words felt useless, like shouting into fog. Instead, I whispered to no one. You said you needed peace, but what do I get? The question floated into the dark and dissolved there, unanswered. Later that night, I went outside. The rain had softened into a drizzle. The streets glowed with reflections, puddles catching the neon lights like pieces of broken glass. I walked aimlessly, feeling the cold seep through my jacket. Every face I passed looked like hers for half a second. Every whisper of the wind sounded like her voice fading away. At one point, I stopped under a streetlight, the kind of soft yellow light that makes everything look unreal. I tilted my head back, eyes closed, letting the rain hit my face. It felt cleansing, but also cruel. Maybe this was what peace felt like from her side: quiet, distant, untouchable. When I returned home, everything felt heavier. I picked up the photo frame by the door and stared at it. The memory was too bright, too full of life to survive this silence. I set it face down. Then I sat at the piano. She used to love when I played, said it made the world slow down. But when I pressed a key that night, the sound was sharp, lonely. It echoed through the empty apartment like a confession. I played anyway, slowly, one note after another, the melody weaving through the stillness until it became something almost sacred. And as the last note faded, I whispered, barely audible even to myself, "Then take your peace." The words trembled, and let me learn to live without noise. The silence that followed was immense, heavy enough to make my chest ache, but also calm. Maybe this was where peace began for me too, not in leaving, but in being left. Not in finding quiet, but in surviving it. That night, I fell asleep on the couch. When I woke up, the morning light spilled through the curtains. Pale, forgiving. Her mug was still on the table, and for a fleeting second, I almost believed she'd walk back in. But she didn't. And somehow, I didn't break. Instead, I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, sat by the window, and watched the rain turn into sunlight. The world hadn't ended. It had just changed its rhythm. And though the silence still pressed against my chest, I began to understand. Maybe peace isn't found. Maybe it's built, one breath at a time, from the rubble of noise someone else left behind. Mornings became the hardest part, because mornings used to be ours. The smell of toast, the low hum of the coffee machine sunlight cutting through the blinds. Those little things that once made life feel like rhythm now just sounded like noise trying to fill the silence she left behind. There was a time when she'd hum to herself while buttering bread, off-key but soft. I'd tease her and she'd roll her eyes, pretending to be offended. Now, that same spot at the counter feels like a memorial, untouched but heavy with memory. Her mug still sits there, the one with a faded cartoon cat she loved since college. I tried moving it once just to clear the space, but my hands froze halfway. It felt wrong, like erasing proof that she'd ever been here. So I left it there, like a shrine, like denial wearing the mask of respect. Every morning I still pour 2 cups of coffee. It's muscle memory now. Pour, stir, place it on the other side of the table, and every morning I watch that second cup go cold. I tell myself it's just habit, but the truth is uglier. It's longing, disguised as routine. My friends say I'm doing better, that I look fine. I smile when they say that. I even laugh sometimes, tell them I've started sleeping again. But the truth is, I don't sleep. Not really. Because when the city goes quiet, when the laughter fades and the world slows down, that's when she returns. In the creak of the hallway, in the echo of footsteps that aren't there, in the static hum of my old speaker at 2 a.m. when silence becomes too loud to bear. At night, I still hear her laughter. It's strange. Memory doesn't play like a movie. It plays like a glitching radio. One moment, she's there, warm, bright, laughing at my terrible jokes, and the next, she's gone, leaving behind only a flicker. I chase that flicker, replay it, over and over. Because sometimes the mind mistakes pain for proof that something existed. One night, I sat in bed and opened my phone. The last message she sent me was still pinned. I hope you understand someday. I stared at it for a long time before hitting record. Voice note. I understand nothing, actually, I said. My voice was low, cracked. I understand you left. That's all. And maybe that's enough. I stopped recording, deleted it, then recorded again. Do you remember the rain that night? You said you needed peace. Funny, I thought peace was supposed to be quiet, not empty. Delete, record again. It became a ritual, not to reach her, but to reach myself. Because somewhere along the way, I forgot what my voice sounded like when it still had something to say. Days blurred together after that. Work, sleep, repeat. I passed by places we used to visit. The bookstore with the sleepy cat, the park bench by the lake, the tiny ramen shop with mismatched bowls. Each one felt like a ghost town, familiar but haunted. There was a strange comfort in the emptiness. Maybe because grief, when stretched over time, starts to feel like routine too. One evening, the sky turned that shade of blue that only exists before rain. Soft, bruised, almost tender. I sat by the window, holding my phone again. Another voice note. This one I didn't delete. You said you needed peace, but I think peace needs both sides to stay quiet. I'm still making noise, aren't I? Still talking to ghosts. I paused. Do you ever think about me? Not the version that hurt you. The version that tried? The recording ended with silence. But in that silence, I swore I could hear her laughter again. Light, fading, like a song that forgot how to end. A few days later, I visited her favorite spot, the Riverside Cafe where we used to argue about nothing. The owner still recognized me. He gave me our old table by the window. It felt wrong, sitting there alone. The chair across from me looked like it was waiting. The waitress came over, smiling politely. "Your usual?" she asked. I nodded. But when the coffee arrived, the smell hit me. Bitter and sweet, exactly how she liked it. My hands trembled as I reached for the cup, and for a second, just one cruel, fragile second, I saw her. Across from me. Head tilted, smile soft. Tapping her spoon against the rim like she always did when thinking. Then she blinked, and she was gone. Just air and memory pretending to be her. I exhaled and whispered into the empty seat, "You got your peace. I hope it's quieter than this." That night, I couldn't sleep again. The rain came back, heavier this time, drumming against the window like an impatient memory. I lay there listening, eyes open in the dark. The room pulsed with absence, her perfume still faint in the air, her laughter echoing in my head. And in that silence, I realized something. I wasn't missing her. I was missing the version of me that existed when she was here. The softer one. The one who believed in warmth, in being chosen. Now, I was just static. A frequency that no longer tuned into anything. So I started writing again. Not letters, not poems, just fragments. Little pieces of truth I was too afraid to say out loud. She left like a whisper. But the silence screamed louder. Love doesn't die. It decays, slowly, beautifully, until it becomes part of the walls. Maybe peace is just loneliness rebranded. Each note went into a folder on my phone called Static. Each one a soundless confession. Weeks passed. The world didn't stop spinning. It never does. Friends stopped checking in as often. People moved on. And somewhere in that emptiness, I started breathing again. Not fully, not freely, but enough to know I wasn't drowning anymore. I began to notice things. The way the morning light hit the wall, the smell of rain-soaked air, the sound of my own footsteps. It wasn't joy, it was survival dressed as peace. Then, one night while scrolling through my recordings, I played one by accident. Do you ever think about me? Her voice wasn't there, obviously, but for the first time, I didn't flinch hearing mine. It didn't sound like pain anymore. It sounded like truth. Maybe that's how healing starts, when your own voice stops sounding like someone else's echo. The next morning, I made only 1 cup of coffee. I still hesitated before pouring, my eyes flicking to her empty mug. But I let it sit, cold, untouched. And as I sipped mine, I whispered, "It's okay. I'll drink enough warmth for both of us." The radio in the corner crackled with faint static before finding a station. Some old song about lost love, the kind we used to dance to barefoot in the kitchen. I smiled despite myself, because this time the static didn't hurt. It just reminded me that even broken signals mean the system's still alive. That night I recorded one last voice note. The room was dim, the air still. You were the noise that made me feel alive. But in your silence, I found myself. I'm not angry anymore, just quieter. I paused, then added, "If peace is what you wanted, I hope you found it. I think I'm starting to find mine, too." I didn't delete it. I didn't send it either. I just saved it, as proof that healing doesn't always roar. Sometimes it hums softly like static fading into clarity. The night ended the way most of them did, with me by the window, the city lights bleeding into the sky. But this time, the quiet didn't suffocate. It simply was. And in that stillness, I realized something simple yet profound. I didn't need her to come back, I just needed to stop waiting for the echo. There's something cruel about mirrors. They don't lie, they just wait. Weeks passed since she left, and yet every time I looked into that glass, I didn't recognize who stared back. The man in the reflection had darker circles under his eyes, sharper edges where softness used to be. His shoulders looked heavier, but his gaze had gone quiet. Grief does that, I think. It doesn't destroy you all at once. It just rearranges you until the reflection feels foreign. One morning, I stood in front of the mirror, scissors in hand. The air was cold, the kind that made sound seem distant. I could still hear her voice in my head, soft, teasing. "Don't ever cut your hair short. It suits you long." Maybe that's why I did it. Each snip echoed through the small room, falling in sync with the beating of my heart. Hair dropped onto the floor, black against white tile, fragments of an older version of me. By the time I finished, I didn't look like the person she knew, and maybe that was the point. I stared at my reflection, breathing hard, not because it hurt, but because it didn't, and that scared me. I whispered to the mirror, "You don't love her anymore. You just love the noise she took with her." The mirror didn't argue. It just watched as I tried to believe my own lie. The next step came unplanned. I started redecorating the apartment. Not to forget her, but to remind myself that it was still mine. I took down the fairy lights she loved, the photos on the fridge, the postcards we collected from trips that now felt like fiction. The walls looked naked, but clean, like exhaling after years of holding your breath. The couch moved to the other side of the room. The curtains changed. Even the scent, gone. I replaced her jasmine diffuser with sandalwood. Small things. But small things matter when you're trying to breathe again. That night, I deleted her messages. Every one of them. Not out of anger, but because I finally realized memories don't live in text. They live in tone, in silence, in how a room feels after someone's laughter fades. As I scrolled through our conversations, I caught glimpses of us. Inside jokes, late-night confessions, photos of half-eaten dinners. Every word felt like a ghost tugging at my sleeve. My thumb hovered over delete all. I hesitated, because what if erasing the words meant erasing the proof that I was once loved? Then I remembered something I'd written the week before. Peace isn't forgetting. It's learning to live without remembering all the time. So I pressed it. Delete. The screen went blank, and strangely, I didn't. Days turned into rhythm. Not healing, not yet, but movement. I started waking earlier, opening the windows, letting air in. The city had its own kind of heartbeat, soft, mechanical, reliable. And I began syncing mine to it. Each morning, I picked up a marker and wrote one line on my wall. Just one truth for the day. The first one was simple. Silence isn't loneliness. It's recovery. At first, it looked foreign, like I was trying to convince myself of something I didn't believe. But words have power when you live them. By the 7th day, that sentence started to sound less like a mantra and more like a homecoming. I started noticing small differences. I no longer checked my phone as often. Her name wasn't the first thought when I woke up. The air didn't ache the same way when I passed the places we used to go. The ache was still there, but it had rhythm now. Like a heartbeat instead of a wound. Like something alive that refused to die but also refused to control me. One evening, I caught my reflection again. The man staring back wasn't smiling, but he wasn't breaking either. There was a quiet kind of strength in his eyes, the kind that comes from surviving something you thought would end you. I touched the mirror, fingertips cold against glass. The reflection touched back, perfectly in sync, and I whispered, "You're still here." It wasn't defiance. It was gratitude. Because for the first time in months, being alone didn't feel like punishment. It felt like progress. I started painting again. The brushes had been gathering dust since she left. She used to say I painted too much sadness into things. Maybe she was right. But sadness was all I had left, and art was the only way it made sense. So I painted what silence looked like. A man standing under a streetlight, hands in his pockets, surrounded by fog. No background, no destination. Just him and the hum of existence. When I stepped back, I realized the man in the painting was me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I was haunted but because the world felt quieter than usual, and I was afraid of losing it. So I went out onto the balcony, city lights flickering like nervous stars. I took a breath and closed my eyes. The wind brushed against my face, gentle, almost kind. For a moment, I felt her there again, not in the way that hurt, but in the way memory softens when it stops being sharp. It wasn't a ghost anymore. It was an echo that had learned its place. In the following weeks, people started to notice. "You look different," one of my coworkers said. "Lighter." I smiled. Maybe I finally stopped caring what wasn't mine. They laughed, not knowing it wasn't a joke. Because healing isn't always about growing stronger. Sometimes it's about shedding weight you didn't realize you'd been dragging. One morning, I opened my notebook and found an old photo tucked between the pages. Her face half hidden by the wind, laughing at something I'd said. I stared at it for a long time. Then, slowly, I tore it in half. Not violently, carefully, like a ritual. I placed one half back in the notebook, her smile, and threw the other half away. Because maybe some memories deserve to stay. Just not all of them. Every night before bed, I looked at the line on my wall. Silence isn't loneliness, it's recovery. The words had started to fade slightly, the ink smudged from the humidity. But I didn't rewrite them. I let them fade, just like she did, because some things are meant to be remembered quietly. One evening, after weeks of stillness, I decided to visit the river. The air was cool, the water silver under the moonlight. I stood there, hands in pockets, listening to the distant hum of the city. For the first time, I didn't feel like a broken part of it. I felt like I belonged again. I picked up a stone, tossed it into the river. The ripples spread, wide, calm, fading slowly into stillness. That's what healing looked like, I realized. Not erasing the impact, just letting it settle. When I got home, I passed by the mirror again, the same one that once showed me everything I hated. The tired eyes, the hollow expression, the empty skin. But now, it reflected something else. Stillness. Not peace, not yet, but the beginning of it. I looked at myself and whispered, "She left to find quiet." I stayed to create it. The reflection smiled back, almost imperceptibly. The kind of smile that belongs to someone who's learning to live again. That night, before I fell asleep, I wrote one last line beneath the first one on my wall. Healing doesn't sound like silence. It sounds like breathing. I set the pen down, stepped back, and stared at both sentences glowing faintly in the dim light. Together, they told a story. Mine. The story of a man who thought peace came from someone else but found it instead in his own reflection. It started on a Sunday, the kind of day that forgets to be bright, where the light leaks through the curtains like it's too tired to try. Dust floated in the air, slow, graceful, almost musical in its stillness. I hadn't touched the piano in months. It sat by the window like a ghost that had stopped haunting me, waiting for permission to breathe again. Her piano. She used to sit there barefoot, hair tied up in that careless knot she always made when she wanted to feel the music. I remember how she'd press a key, smile, and say, "It's not the sound that matters. It's what you don't play that makes it beautiful." At the time, I didn't understand. I was all noise, laughter too loud, plans too rushed, emotions too raw. But that morning, I sat down. My fingers trembled over the keys, hovering like they were afraid to disturb something sacred. When the first note finally escaped, it cracked, weak, uneven. Then another, and another. The melody was broken, hesitant, unsure, just like me. Yet between each note there was silence. A silence that didn't ache anymore. A silence that felt clean. I played until the edges of my memories softened. Her voice became a distant echo that didn't sting. The walls seemed to lean in, listening, not judging, just holding space for the person I was becoming. Somewhere between the rising chords and fading echoes, I realized something painful and pure. She wasn't wrong. We were noise. Two people trying to drown out their loneliness in each other's volume. We mistook chaos for connection, volume for passion. And when the storm ended, she went searching for quiet, the kind I was too afraid to give. Now I understood. She didn't leave because she stopped loving me. She left because I was still learning how to listen. The piano hummed beneath my fingertips like an apology. Soft, fragile, unfinished. I closed my eyes and let the music dissolve into the kind of silence she used to crave. It wasn't empty anymore. It was full. Full of the things I'd never said, the apologies I'd whispered too late, the fragments of peace I was slowly stitching together. And in that fragile stillness, I smiled. Not because I'd moved on, but because I'd finally stopped chasing the echo of us. The last note lingered in the air like a question, trembling before fading completely. And in that final silence, the one between what was and what could still be, I whispered to no one, "You were right. Love was always in the quiet." Then I let the air swallow the sound and the silence answered back. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, the kind that pretends to mean nothing but somehow holds everything. The sun was slipping behind the clouds, spilling light through my window in fractured shapes. I was halfway through a cup of cold coffee when my phone buzzed once. Just once. I almost didn't look. I almost let it fade into the background hum of everything I'd trained myself to ignore. But something in the air shifted. A quiet gravity pulling me toward the screen. Her name. Still saved the same way. Still untouched. For a moment, time refused to move. My chest tightened not from longing, but from the way memory suddenly becomes too loud. The message was simple, almost cruel in its softness. "Hey, I've been thinking about you." I stared at it until the words lost meaning. Just pixels, light, code, yet somehow they managed to rearrange the rhythm of my heartbeat. I didn't reply, not because I hated her, but because I finally knew what silence was worth. Still, curiosity is a quiet poison. That night, I found myself scrolling through her social media, like a thief sneaking into an old house to see if the lights were still on. There she was, smiling beside someone new, a sunset behind them, a caption beneath, "Finding peace again." But peace shouldn't look rehearsed. Her eyes, framed by all that golden light, were distant, like she'd smiled for the camera and then exhaled something heavy right after. I lingered on that photo longer than I should have, searching for the girl who once laughed barefoot beside my piano. She wasn't there, only a silhouette, a shadow shaped like someone I used to know. My thumb hovered over the message button. Just one tap, and I could have sent something, anything. But no. Instead, I locked the screen and set the phone face down. The world dimmed into stillness again. It was strange how silence, once my punishment, had become my protection. How the absence of sound could feel more honest than any words we'd ever exchanged. I leaned back, eyes tracing the slow movement of light across the floor. For the first time, her name didn't sting. It just existed. Like a song I'd once known by heart but no longer needed to replay. Maybe she had her peace now. Maybe I had mine. And as the day folded into twilight, I whispered into the quiet, "Some people don't return to stay. They return to see if the silence still remembers them." Mine didn't. It simply held me, calm, unshaken, and let her shadow fade. It happened the way all cruel coincidences do, quietly, without warning, as if the universe wanted to test whether I'd really healed or just learned how to pretend. It was late afternoon, the kind of hour where time slows just enough for you to notice the dust on the window, the hum of the espresso machine, the sound of spoons meeting porcelain. I'd been sitting alone at the corner table of a small cafe, reading something I wasn't really reading. The rain outside had just stopped and the world smelled new again. Then I heard it, a laugh. Low, familiar, a sound I'd once built a life around. I didn't have to look up. My chest already knew. But I did. And there she was, standing in the doorway, her hair damp from the rain, her sweater slightly too big, like she'd borrowed comfort from someone else's arms. Her eyes scanned the room, caught mine, and for a heartbeat, the years between us collapsed into silence. We didn't speak right away. She approached slowly, like someone walking into a memory unsure if it would still welcome her. "Hey," she said finally. The word carried too much history for its size. I nodded, gestured to the seat across from me. She sat. The space between us, once electric, once unbearable, now just existed. A quiet table between two people who had outgrown their ghosts. She looked older, somehow gentler. There was a slowness to her that didn't used to be there, like peace had softened her edges but carved new hollows beneath her eyes. "You look different," she said. "So do you," I replied. A smile flickered across her lips, the same one that used to disarm me, now just a faint echo of what was. We talked, or rather, she did. She spoke about her travels, her new routines, her attempts at peace, how she tried yoga, therapy, solitude, how none of it felt like the peace she expected. Then she hesitated, eyes lowering, voice trembling. "I miss us. I thought leaving would help me find myself, but I just keep finding you in places you've never been." For a moment, her words hung in the air like unfinished music. I watched her hands, the way they trembled slightly as she wrapped them around her cup. I used to know every movement of those fingers, every story they told without words. But now, they were foreign, familiar shapes carrying unfamiliar weight. I wanted to feel something, anger, longing, anything, but all I felt was wind. Her voice kept moving, soft, pleading. "Do you ever think about me?" I thought about her every time silence became too heavy to bear, every time a song ended mid-note, every time the rain tried to sound like her footsteps. But not like this, not anymore. "I used to," I said, "but the person I thought about isn't you anymore." She looked at me then, really looked, as if realizing that I wasn't to the man she left behind, that the boy who waited for her to return had vanished quietly one morning and never came back. In his place sat someone who had learned to live inside the quiet she'd once chosen over him. She bit her lip, eyes glistening. "I made a mistake." I smiled faintly, not out of pride, not out of cruelty, but because I finally understood. "We both did," I whispered. "But some mistakes are meant to end us before they remake us." The wind outside pressed against the windows, soft and unsteady, carrying the faint scent of rain and endings. For a second, I almost reached out, almost touched her hand, almost asked her to stay, but I didn't. Instead, I sat there, watching her realize that she was speaking to someone who no longer belonged to the version of her memory. She was talking to a ghost, but not hers, mine. A ghost that had stopped haunting himself long ago. She exhaled, long and heavy. "You've changed." "Yeah," I said, standing. "That's what silence does." I left my half-finished coffee on the table and walked into the drizzle, the cold air wrapping around me like a promise kept too late. Behind me, through the glass, I saw her watching, a silhouette framed by rain. And for the first time, I didn't turn back, because the echo between us had finally died, and in its place there was only peace. Quiet, earned, and mine. That night, the rain returned. Not loud, just enough to sound like memory, tapping gently against my window. The kind of rain that makes you write things you'll never say aloud. I sat at my desk, a single lamp painting the room in gold and shadow. The air smelled faintly of coffee and paper, that quiet intimacy of solitude I'd grown to love. The encounter at the cafe still lingered in me, not as pain, but as a strange kind of tenderness. So I took out a pen, and a blank sheet of paper that had been waiting longer than I realized. "Dear you," I began. The words spilled slower than my heartbeats, as if each one needed to make peace before being born. "I used to wait for your footsteps in every silence, in the echo of stairwells, in the hum of streetlights, in the pauses between songs. You were the sound I kept searching for long after you left." The ink bled slightly, delicate, hesitant, like my confession was afraid of being too real. I wrote about how I used to measure my days in almosts, almost calling, almost forgetting, almost healing. About how peace used to feel like betrayal because it meant accepting the end. "I thought I'd never forgive you for leaving," I wrote. "But I see it now. You didn't abandon me. You freed me from the noise we made together." The words came easier after that. My hand moved without thought, like it finally trusted me to be honest. "You left to find calm," I wrote. "I stayed and built it from the wreckage." Outside, thunder rumbled softly, a reminder that even storms have their gentler phases. I looked around the room that had once felt like a cage and realized it had become a sanctuary. Every object, the mug, the books, the old piano by the window, felt lighter, like they'd all exhaled the same grief I had. I kept writing, not to reach her, but to reach the parts of myself that still whispered her name in dreams. I told her how I'd learned to play the pauses, to hear the quiet not as absence, but as music. How I finally understood that peace wasn't something you find, it's something you build, piece by trembling piece from everything that hurt you. When I finished, I read the letter once more, softly, like a prayer. There were no accusations, no questions left to haunt her. Only understanding. Only release. Then I folded it neatly, and without hesitation, I lit the corner with a match. The flame caught quickly, curling the paper into itself, devouring my words in tiny flashes of orange. The room filled with the faint scent of smoke and closure. I watched as the ashes crumbled in the tray, glowing faintly before fading into gray. It wasn't anger that made me burn it. It was gratitude. Gratitude for the silence that taught me more than love ever did. Some stories don't end with words. Some confessions don't need to be heard. As the last ember dimmed, I whispered. Not to her, but to the quiet that had become my companion. Thank you for not coming back. And with that, I blew out the candle, letting darkness fold over me like peace finally earned. Outside, the rain softened, and for the first time, so did I. Weeks slipped by like calm waves, slow and deliberate, the kind that used to scare me because they meant nothing was happening, nothing to fight, nothing to fix. But now, that stillness felt like home. The city moved at its usual restless pace outside my window. Neon lights flickering, people rushing, stories crossing paths without notice. I moved slower now. I noticed things. The way sunlight touched my desk in the mornings, the quiet hum of my coffee machine, the way silence no longer felt like punishment. Then she started to appear. At first, I thought it was coincidence. Her shadow at the back of the crowd during my gallery exhibition, eyes tracing the paintings she once inspired. She lingered near the exit, pretending to look at her phone, but I could feel the weight of her gaze like an echo trying to find its source. Later, I'd see her again, at the cafe near the park, sitting by the window where I used to write. She never came close, never spoke, just watched, maybe hoping I'd break the silence she once asked for. I didn't. I learned that peace isn't about reclaiming what left. It's about learning not to chase the footsteps walking away. She began appearing online too, liking an old post, watching a story, leaving digital fingerprints where her hands once belonged. Little traces of longing disguised as curiosity. Maybe she thought I didn't notice. Maybe she wanted to see if I still burned. But I didn't. Not anymore. Because peace had changed me. It wasn't loud or glowing. It was quiet, almost invisible. It lived in the way I could breathe without waiting for someone to answer back. It lived in the art I created now, softer, lighter, full of open space. And I think she saw it. She saw the stillness in my smile, the steadiness in my silence, the way I no longer carried her name like a wound. And maybe, just maybe, that when she finally understood, peace wasn't something you escape to. It's something you build from what you survived. There was a moment, during one of my later exhibits, when our eyes met again. She stood near the painting titled Silence Between Notes, the one inspired by the piano I once played for her. Her expression was unreadable, a mix of recognition and regret, like she was staring at the version of me she'd left too early to meet. I didn't move toward her, didn't speak, because sometimes the truest closure isn't in conversation, it's in letting someone realize they no longer hold the same power over your peace. I turned away, greeting another guest, my voice calm, my laughter unforced. When I looked back, she was gone, but I didn't feel loss, only lightness. I walked outside afterward, the air cool and kind against my skin. The evening sky was painted in soft gold, the kind of color that doesn't demand attention. It just exists, beautifully, quietly. And as I stood there beneath it, I thought, maybe peace looks different on everyone. Hers was found by leaving, Mine, by staying still. And in that stillness, I finally heard what freedom sounded like. The soft, unbroken silence of forgiveness fully lived. It was dusk, that tender hour when the world begins to fold itself into quiet, and even the air feels heavy with memory. The city was humming in the distance, streetlights flickering to life one by one, painting everything in soft amber. I was walking home, hands in my pockets, lost in the kind of peace that doesn't announce itself. It just lingers, quietly, like a long exhale after years of holding your breath. Then I heard it, my name, spoken softly, almost uncertain, like she wasn't sure she still had the right to say it. I turned. She was standing there, framed by the fading light, the wind catching strands of her hair. Time had touched her gently but not kindly. There was a tired grace in her posture, a fragile beauty carved by regret. For a heartbeat, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was thick, familiar, almost sacred. Then she broke it. "You look happy," she said. Her voice trembled, not from cold, but from the weight of everything unspoken between us. I smiled, not out of pride, not out of pity, but with the kind of calm that comes only after surviving your own storm. "I am." Her lips parted slightly, like she wanted to say more, but couldn't. Her eyes glistened, reflecting the streetlights, little constellations of unshed tears. She looked at me the way people look at something they didn't know they'd miss until it's gone, with awe and sorrow and disbelief. "I thought," she whispered, her voice cracking, "I thought your silence meant you stopped caring." I took a slow breath, the air cool and clean between us. "No," I said quietly. "It meant I started caring for myself." The words hung there, soft but unshakable. They didn't echo like they used to. They simply settled, like dust finding its home. Her eyes broke then. Tears slipped down her cheeks, silently, gracefully. Not the kind that beg for forgiveness, but the kind that admit you finally understand what your choices cost, and in that moment I saw it. The truth she'd been carrying all this time. She hadn't found peace. She'd only found the absence of noise. It wasn't the same. She took a step closer, her voice barely a breath. "You really changed." I nodded. Silence changes everything, even love. The street was quiet except for the faint rustle of leaves and the distant hum of traffic. The wind brushed past us, lifting the moment like it didn't want it to last too long. For the first time, I didn't feel the need to fill the silence between us. For the first time, she did. She looked down, wiped her tears, and whispered, "I see it now. What you became." I didn't answer. Some realizations don't need applause, only acknowledgement. And for the first time, she was the one surrounded by silence. The same silence she once craved. Now heavy, now echoing back everything she tried to escape. I turned to leave, and she didn't stop me. Maybe because she finally understood that silence isn't empty. It's full of everything we never said. As I walked away, I heard her whisper my name again, softer this time, almost reverent, like a prayer meant only for the air to keep. I didn't turn back, because I knew this was the ending she needed. Not the one that broke her, but the one that taught her. And as the night deepened, I smiled to myself. A quiet, steady smile. She had found her silence, but I had found my peace.